not going to respect them for it. It's impossible.
You know what? That brings up an interesting point, though. Like, I'm a certified parent educator, and you talked about, and I'm also, you know, like when I was reading Bennis's book, he was talking about context. Context is a word that kind of stood out to me, and what you were just talking about is like different contexts that we find ourselves in as individuals. Like you have the context of being a father in a home.
Right.
Then you have the context of being an employee on the job.
Right.
You know, and or even an employer. You know, where you're head of the company and things like that, and you have to lead. So let's talk about that first context, like being a father in a home. How does leadership play out in that context?
Great question. Actually, I like to tell stories, and actually this story happened yesterday morning, and actually you were a part of it. And it actually fits in with principle number 1, which is applying self-discipline. So, and it goes into a lot of what I want to and hopefully get to cover this evening, the power of your mind and the law of attraction, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But Saturday morning, as soon as I rolled out of bed, the mind frame was in a bad mood. So I have to go back a week and a half. You know, being that I live up here in New England, we all love our weather up here in the wintertime. So I had all this ice that had formed on my driveway because we had a couple of nice days of weather. I decided to clean it up and everything else, and I have lower back problems because when I worked out 20 years ago, I pulled it, and once you pull it once, you're in trouble as you get older. So I pushed myself to the edge, and I thought I just gotten to the edge, but I pushed myself over, and I paid the price that weekend. As my back got better, ironically, for some reason, it got worse again, Thursday, Friday of this week. So when I woke up yesterday morning, I was in a bad mood because my back was still bothering me. So right away, my mind was set to bring negativity towards me. I had laundry that I had to do. My 2 wonderful sons were more rambunctious than usual, or so I thought, because obviously I was in a bad mood, so everything they did seemed more out of context or more out of line than usual, but it really wasn't. So the morning progressed. I did my routine, and I started to cook my breakfast, and the phone rang. And that was you, but I didn't know that at the time. So my oldest son, Michael, picked up the phone. And maybe 2 or 3 seconds went by, and I turned around, and I saw him looking at the display to see who it was. Of course, now I'm thinking to myself, what are you doing? You're supposed to, when you pick up a phone, you're supposed to say hello. So I, because I was in a bad mood, decided to scream out, "Say hello, dummy." You might have even heard that at that point. Of course, he looked at me and, go ahead, I'm sorry?
I think I missed that.
You missed that part. Well, I'm admitting it now because I want people to understand and relate to these principles of leadership and how, as you said, how it applies to me today as a father. Yeah. So anyway, so he says, "Oh, it's for you." And, of course, at that point, I really convinced myself it was a telemarketer. I didn't know it was you at that time. And my wife came running over, and she grabbed the phone from Michael's hands, and she looks at me. She says, "It's Jeff Faulkerson." I said, "You've got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. This is a man I've been talking to about the virtues of principles, and here I am yelling out to my son, dummy, right?" So, of course, now I'm angry. Now my brain starts, again, getting angrier because now I put myself in a position to sound like an idiot, and I was an idiot. I did this wrong thing by saying what I said, but it wasn't over there. Once the phone hung up, I decided to turn my anger on my son because, of course, it was his fault that I screamed out calling him a dummy. It wasn't my own fault, right? And this is what I keep on talking about. What concerns me about society today is that we're quick to blame others, and we have to start understanding the emotion of anger, because when you allow the emotion of anger to control your action of thinking, you're never going to make the right decisions. You are always going to make the wrong decisions. So you knew I was going to call you back, and I ate breakfast and everything else, and you and I talked for about, I don't know what it was, 40, 45 minutes or so, and I got myself into a better place in my mind at that point. I calmed down, and whenever I talk about the principles, I start thinking. So when I actually hung up the phone with you, Michael actually happened to be sitting downstairs with me, and I immediately looked at him and I said, "Michael, I'm sorry. I should have never yelled at you the way that I did." And he accepted the apology, and he looked at me and said, "Well, why are you saying that now?" And I said, "Well, because I hadn't said it yet, and it was the right thing to say." So, we all make mistakes, but you've got to be able to understand when you make these mistakes. When you get angry, get over it as quickly as possible. Become passionate, do the right thing. So 2 things that were accomplished here. I believe in asking yourself this question: what could I have done, or what can I do better? So what could I have done was I should have never done that to begin with. So I recognize that, and as I'm thinking through the process, I say to myself, you could have done something differently, but what you can do now to make it better is be man enough to apologize. So I learned myself personally, and at the same time, hopefully I've taught my son a lesson that his father doesn't think he's bigger than who he is, and that when he does something wrong, even though it's towards his own son, he can apologize for it. And those are the signs that I believe are what's missing in our society today and in leadership. We take a stance, we get angry, we refuse to understand the role we play in, we continuously point the finger of blame, and that's anger. That's the emotion. It really clouds your judgment. It's amazing how through that process, when you called, I convinced myself it was a telemarketer. Once we hung up, even though I knew deep down in my heart that I was the one who was angry at myself for even saying that to begin with, I took it out on my son some more. So we need to start understanding that emotion of anger, and it really plays a big role. Okay, let's go back to business now. It plays a big role in corporate America today. We're a very angry country. It's he and them. Being in a management position, I'm the they and they're the they, and it's very divisive. And it's important that leadership's people stand up and take on a role of someone who actually has principles, someone who will reflect upon themselves. I believe that if you follow the principles of leadership, it will help you to think with depth and gain perspective. And I know it's helped my life, and if any of my friends are listening out there, they can certainly call in and they can call me a liar, because I know they won't. It's helped us all. It really helps you to get into a frame of mind where you start thinking positively, because you start holding yourself accountable for your actions, and you start believing that it's now your responsibility to be a better person to other people.
Well, let me throw out another question, because we're still dealing with the context of family, and in terms of do you feel it's your mission to instill these values, these principles in your children, and also if that's your mission, how do you get these principles across to your children? I mean, you talk very thoroughly about the situation that happened, but in terms of what you do on a day-to-day basis, because we have a lot of parents out there that are really interested in, because even though I'm a certified parent educator, I've done segments on parental influence. So how has your influence as a parental leader, how do you get that across to your children?
Well, it's important. First of all, don't believe in the philosophy of do as I say, not as I do, right? Type of thing. So actions speak louder than words. If you're going to believe in something, you got to apply it too. So I believe in applying it on a regular basis. Funny you asked that question too. I think it was maybe about 3 years ago. Time flies at certain times in your age, and I don't recall if it was 3, maybe 4 years ago. I'm a very confident individual, and I want to instill confidence in my sons. And one of the things I decided to do was that on a yearly basis, I was going to pick a word, an important word, a word that I believed could help them to start to gain confidence. And at some point, I was going to get to the word confident and try and teach them that. And as I keep on doing this, I think that's something that's internal, and maybe we can get to that a little bit later. But the word that I chose, and ironically I still use 3 years later, is think. I want my sons to understand the importance of taking the time to think, okay? And I don't believe a lot of people do that. When you're angry, you don't. I mean, let's go back to the example I just gave. You rationalize in your mind, because your mind is so clouded by anger, that how you act, what you say, what you do is okay, and it's not okay. So I always have this, whenever the opportunity arises, and you have a child as well, they push your limits at times. And there are moments when I take that opportunity to sit down with my sons and have a conversation with them and get them to think about what they've done or what they can do better. So we're always using those words. And if anyone were to ask my sons today, what's that word your daddy always talks about, they'll both tell you, think. So that's my process. And like I said, I thought I was going to change